All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Everybody, welcome to the Planning Commission meeting, February 27th, 2023. It's now 6 o'clock. We're going to call this to order and need the roll call.
Commissioner Egner.
Here.
Commissioner Mercer.
Here.
Commissioner McGann here. Commissioner and Chairman Engelke.
Here.
Commissioner Ward.
Where? Here.
Where? Well, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Correct that.
You can call Ward.
Ward. Commissioner Little. Here. Commissioner Stokes. Commissioner Stokes is not here. And Commissioner Vidal. Here.
All right, if everyone will stand, we'll do our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, I hope everyone's had the chance to look over the minutes, and if we need any corrections, please let us know. Otherwise, do we have a motion to approve?
Chairman,
Go ahead.
I move that we accept the minutes from the January 30th meeting.
Second. All right, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? All right, roll call.
Commissioner Egner.
Yes.
Commissioner Mercer.
Here.
Commissioner McGann, yes. Commissioner Ware.
Yes.
Ward. Commissioner Little.
Here. I'm sorry. Yes.
And Commissioner Vidal.
Yes.
And Commissioner Stokes is not in. Is he coming tonight? No. You don't know or no? Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right, there is no old business, so we'll move on to new business. Case number 2122, a request for a subdivision final plat named Spacebox West PUD to take a newly platted property and divide it into two lots for development located at 4500 Goodman Road West. That is an unofficial and unassigned address in Horn Lake by York Development, applicant and purchasing party Dale Wilson, landowner IPD LLC, designer and engineer, consisting of 7.89 acres plus minus. The subject parcel is currently zoned as a planned unit development. At this time, I will turn this over to Director Barr.
Good evening, Chair and...
I was going to, I'm sorry. I just want to let everybody, if the commissioners could mute their microphones when we're not speaking, it'll help with the feedback. Thank you. Sorry, go ahead, Director.
Nope, quite all right. Yes, good evening, Chair and Planning Commissioners. So I'll try to continue here. They're making adjustments. Okay, good, very good. Just some housekeeping or whatever for those in attendance. There are some agendas for tonight in the back table and a sign-in sheet, so if you could fill those out, that would be great. There was some Planning Commission, the entire packet's back there. Hopefully you were able to find those on the chair as you came in. So on this particular case, you might be familiar with this. As you stated in the kind of the announcement of the case, it was another subdivision case that the city considered and approved fairly recently, just within the last, 2 or 3 months. And if you remember at that time, it was two properties, and the plat was to bring them together, make one larger property. And that's what we're working from now. But now what the developer wants to do is divide it back into two properties, but not in the same configuration. And so it's before you tonight to give it that consideration on that subdivision plat. So you can see up on the slide, I can go to the next slide, please. Yeah, what we do is we just have some general notes which defines, like in this particular case, it's a minor subdivision, just because there's would be one property and 2 lots are involved. So it's a minor subdivision by definition. Next slide. Next slide. And feel free at any time, either in the public or as planning commissioners, if you need to go back to a slide or deliberate on it or want some more detail, feel free to just to interject or something like that. Basically what that slide is saying is it's right from the subdivision regulations, which defines a minor subdivision, and it also states for the applicant and the public what the procedure is for recording a final plat, because this is a final plat. We were able to skip the preliminary plat stage since we were familiar with the previous platting work done on this. Next slide. So this shows the subject property highlighted in the center with the blue box. And I'll just kind of go around with some of the surrounding zonings and land uses surrounding the subject property. There's AR, which is the agricultural residential zoning to the north. And then to the east is C4, commercial zoning, and there's a local church that's located there. Across the road to the south, across Goodman Road, is PUD, which is planned unit development zoning, and a single-family residential subdivision. To the southwest, there's more AR type zoning, and then west of the subject property, it's more C4. There's a indoor recreational land use there. The zoning of the subject property now is PUD, and it's not located in the 100-year floodplain, so that's a positive thing. As stated in the opening remarks, it's 7.89 acres in size. The number of lots proposed is 2. The public water supplier is the City of Horn Lake, as well as the sanitary sewer provider. Next slide. So these I'll just have Andrew. Thank you, Andrew, for mining the computer over there tonight. There's some field photos taken from last year that shows the subject property. So here we get to on this slide, we actually get to the proposed division of what's desired, where we have the larger lot, which would be called Lot 1, basically to the southeastern portion. And then we've got a proposed lot number 2 down in the very southwest corner. And you see some things highlighted there. There's the existing 100-foot wide transmission line easement along the north side of the property and the west side of the property. There's also a sanitary sewer main that's along the west side property. And then there's a 10-foot wide sewer easement along the south side of both of the proposed lots. You can see Goodman Road West there at the very bottom of the slide. In our review, we did have that the actual subdivision regulations would require a 10-foot wide utility easement called for Lot 2, so we'd ask that be revised to meet the subdivision standards. Next slide. On this is the what I call this is I kind of call it like a zoning double check, if you will. And I've kind of already went through the surrounding zonings and land uses, so I won't deliberate it here. But this is from the subdivision regulations, section 34-62, where it talks about the general suitability. So this is kind of like the city's opportunity through the Planning Commission and the Board of Aldermen to basically double check what's planned as far as what's in mind for the proposed land, for the proposed property, and then the subject. Can't talk tonight at all. Let's just start that all over again. Basically what they're trying to do is compare the proposed land uses with the subject property to the land uses around it. There we go. So, next slide. This details section 3489, which are minimum standards laid out by the subdivision regulations. I've kind of enumerated sections D and E, which has to do with drainage and sidewalks. So there are notes number 9 and 10 on the plat, which is page 2 of the 2 pages of the plat, speaks of erosion, sediment, and drainage control. So that's met. Item E there, no sidewalks are shown, but are referred to via the site plan design review case with note number 11 on page 2 of the plat. So, so we'd encourage, obviously, the subdivision regulations require a subdivision to be built, and that should be noted on the plat as in itself. Next slide. So these two items are still from the subdivision regulations, still that section 3489, but it's more specific to F, water supply, G, sanitary sewer systems, and K, erosion and sediment control. We'd ask that the applicant provide the water service and sanitary sewer. I guess they've already showed the sewer. They would show the water service main lines on the plat to help meet the wording of the subdivision regs. And the erosion control and sediment control comments on the plat are met. So we go to the last slide. So you can see the possible motion there with the recommendation of approval with 2 conditions attached to it. A, increase the rear yard utility easement for lot number 2 to 10 feet in width. And B, add the location of the public water service and main lines on the plat. And that would conclude the presentation, unless you have any questions. Thank you.
All right. So does any of the commissioners have any questions for Director Barr? Is the applicant here? If you would just state your name and address. Does anybody have any questions for the applicant?
Just have a quick one. If you were, and I'm sure you told us at the last meeting that you were here, what is going to go into that southwest corner where it's just a small lot?
It's unknown at the moment. Last I heard was some sort of office space, but that's all I know.
Okay, but you'll be owning that. That's part of the project that you will develop, correct?
The site plan that was approved, that's just a vacant lot at the moment. I think nothing is planned there, as far as I know.
PUD for lot 1, the larger one, would be the storage place, the indoor and outdoor storage facility. And then for that lot 2, which we're seeing here to be proposed to be created, I think there was a list of about 8 or 9 things, and they're kind of plucked from the city zoning ordinance, I think mainly from like the C3 zone. It'd be like a restaurant, could be like a small office complex, doctor's office,
Okay.
those types of uses.
Okay, yeah, I remembered everything else. I just could not remember that one spot. So.
Any other questions?
The issue of the sidewalk. I'm looking here and it said no sidewalk shown, but was referred via the site plan design. Page 12.
But just note for the record that a sidewalk is required through the subdivision regulations, and then if not shown on the plat, there should definitely be a note that says that a sidewalk would be provided by the owner or developer. But ideally, it would be shown also like on the south side of the property to show what that course of that sidewalk is going to be.
Mr. Barr, would that need to be in the conditions, or since that's already required, we don't need to list that?
I would rather overkill it for safety's sake, just to make sure that it's explicitly stated. I mean, obviously, it's in the subdivision regulations, but lots of times I like to enumerate it just so there's no ambiguity on the owner or the developer's side.
Okay, any other questions for Director Barr or for the applicant? Thank you, sir. All right, if there is no other further discussion, do we have a motion?
Yes, we have a motion. After review of application case number 2122 SDFP, a request for a 2-lot commercial subdivision final plat called Spacebox West PUD, consisting of 7.89 acres plus or minus. The Horn Lake Planning Commission recommends approval of the request to the Board of Aldermen with the following conditions attached to it, A and B, and also add C as the installation of sidewalk.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All right, roll call, please.
Commissioner Egner,
Yes.
Commissioner Mercer? Yes. Commissioner McGann, yes. Commissioner Ware?
Yes.
Commissioner Little?
Yes.
Commissioner Vidal?
Yes.
Commissioner Stokes is absent. Motion passes.
All right, thank y'all. On to case, letter B, case number 2023-2. Request for a subdivision final plat named revision of Lot 19 Center Street Industrial Park to combine two existing industrial zone lots for industrial development located at the southeast corner of East Center Street and Hobbs Drive in Horn Lake by HLMS Recycling Services LLC, applicant and landowner IPD LLC Engineering, consisting of .70 acres plus or minus. This subject parcel is currently zoned M1 Light Industrial District. Again, I'll turn this over to Director Barr.
Thank you for that. Now, on this particular case, I signed it to Andrew Hawkins-Smith, the planner one, so I'm going to turn it over to him.
Okay, so this location is at the corner of Hobbs and East Center Street. All the lots on the north side and south side of Hobbs are zoned M1. And that was the plat shown on the screen right there. So in Chapter 34, Section 2, Section B, it shows the general information that's required. This will include the name of the subdivision, graphic scale of the plat, north arrow, the date, the name of the owners or subdivider, and then a sketch of the map, and then it's got to have the township, range, section, and parts of the sections, the certificate, state registration number, and a legal seal of the registered engineer or land surveyor, among many other things. And so I have circled on the plat in green all the correct information that they're supposed to have. So at the top, they got the graphic scale, they got the north arrow. It's titled Final Plat Revision of Lot 19 Center Street Industrial Park. And it's got the date on there, and then the very bottom circle is the owner and developer, HLMS Recycling Services LLC. And then at the very top, they do have the vicinity map. It says location sketch map showing relationship of subdivision site to area, including township, range, section, and parts of sections. They also have that section 30T-1-S, R-8-W, City of Horn Lake, DeSoto County, Mississippi. And then they're also required to have the certificate, state registration number, and legal seal of a registered engineer or land surveyor testing the accuracy of the survey and the correct location of all monuments shown. And they have all of this on there as well. And then also there's a section 4 and 5, private restrictions or trusteeships and their periods of existence. There wasn't any information on that one. And then number 5 is acknowledgement of the owners of the plat and restrictions, including dedication to the public use of all streets, alleys, parks, and other open spaces shown thereon, and the granting of easements required. That was also satisfied. And then the ordinance also specifies a number 6, proper certificates for owner, notary public, registered engineer, or land surveyor, planning commission, board of mayor and aldermen, and chancery clerk shown in that order. And it has all of these. It's got the corporate certificate, and it's just named slightly different from what the ordinance requires, but that's fine. Corporate certificate, notary certificate, certificate of surveyor, mortgagee certificate, and then planning commission, governing authority, Horn Lake mayor and board of aldermen, and then the state of Mississippi, county of DeSoto. Technically, it says it's got to be in order, and so that should be at the bottom right-hand corner, but others in the past have been exactly like this. The main issue that we found was on the plat, on number 4, it says domestic water will be provided by the city of Horn Lake, but this is actually an area served by the Horn Lake Water Association, so this wording needs to be changed to reflect that. And then these are also some other things required in Chapter 34, Section 2, letter A. The boundary lines of the area being subdivided with accurate distances and angles showing all the relationship of the subdivision to section, township, and range, the lines of all proposed streets and alleys with their widths and names of all streets, the accurate outline of any portions of the property intended to be dedicated or granted to public use with the statement or of dedication thereon, the lines of all adjoining property and the line adjoining streets and alleys with their widths and names of all streets within 100 feet of the proposed subdivision, all lot lines together with an identification of all lots which shall be numbered consecutively, the location of all building lines and easements provided for public use services or utilities, all dimensions, both linear and angular, necessary for locating the boundaries of the subdivision, lots, streets, alleys, easements, and other areas for public or private use. Linear dimensions are to be given to the nearest 0.01 feet. The radii, arcs, or chords, points of tangency, and central angles for curvilinear streets and radii for rounded corners. The location of all survey monuments and the descriptions as provided in Section 3488. And then additionally, it says that the final plat and 8 print shall be at a scale of not more than 100 feet to the inch from an accurate survey, and this does have a scale of 1 inch equals 30 feet, so it passes that too. And that concludes this presentation, and this is a possible motion. You want me to read the possible motion, or is this fine?
I think it's there for us to see or whatever. I added a couple items, the B and the C. So, please add locations of the water and sewer lines per section 3489 F and D of the subdivision regulations. And then we just need clarity on item C, because item C has to do with the setbacks. Now, in my career, I've found 2 big camps in the whole planning world when it has to do with setbacks on plats. There's one side of the camp, if you will, that says just don't ever put setbacks on a plat. And then there's another group that says, well, setbacks on a plat are fine, but it just needs to be noted that, in the end, over time, let's say something gets platted and it has the setbacks on the plat, the zoning could change of the specific property, and if the zoning changes, well, then the setbacks could change, and the zoning would control over the subdivision plat. So, but in this particular case, what I noticed is that they had the notes saying one thing on the plat for the setbacks, and then they had the pictorial representation of the setbacks. And the thing that's potentially problematic is that I don't know, and maybe I don't know if the developer actually knows which way they want to orient the property. And the reason that's key in this case, it's a corner lot. And so obviously with the two sides being on road frontage, obviously those are both front properties. So then that begs the question, like the other two sides, you know, which one's the side and which one's the rear? So if a person looks in the zoning ordinance for the city, it does provide some direction there, some guidance. So if it was going to have a building and it was going to orient, let's say, to the west, then per the zoning ordinance, excuse me if I can talk, the opposite way that it would orient towards the front, the back of that would be the rear yard. And then obviously then the south would be the side yard. So now if there's going to be a building there and it would orient to the north, then the rear yard would be the south property line, and then the side would be the east. So, so there needs to be congruency there between the note and then how it's going to orient as far as how the setbacks as depicted on the plat are going to be. So the M1 setbacks, they're 50 foot for the front yards, 10 feet for the side, and then 20 feet of width for the rear yard. So, so we just need probably some clarity from the developer if they have an idea if they're going to put a building there and which way they're going to orient the property to the west or to the north.
All right, thank you, Director Barr and Andrew. All right, so do we have any questions? Okay, go ahead. The B and C are up on the screen. Well, I mean, I'm just saying it's not on our packet. It's up there at some point.
No, I added it today. So sorry about that.
Okay, so the presentation gave a lot of information about what needed to be in the information that was presented to the planning department, but we didn't get a whole lot on what was actually on the property. Like on the first one, you know, you were telling us that where the setbacks were, I mean, where the utility easements were, that kind of thing. And, you know, on this one, it was more along the lines of the actual documentation, which doesn't really concern us.
Okay. So when you said the first one, do you mean like tonight's first case?
Right, 21, 22?
Okay. Yeah, with this particular plat, they're showing there's a, 30-foot wide power line easement on the west side of the subject property. And then along the south side, they're showing a 15 feet wide utility easement. And then along the east side of the subject property, a 10 feet wide drainage and utility easement. That would be, I'm looking on, I think it's both pages 5 and 6 in the packet. Either one of those would show that. I don't know if that helps. Which the proposed easements actually meets and exceeds the actual subdivision requirements. So therefore, that's why it wasn't in the presentation as an item of note. I mean, it could have been noted, obviously, but.
So it's my understanding that the plat that we have before us meets all but the three conditions that you that we have on it, that you said could be possible part of a motion. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Commissioner Ware, yes, it is. Yes.
Now, this particular piece of property we're talking about, that won't be coming to the north onto this property, will it?
My understanding is that the actual use that's to the south, the recycling center, this is something that they own and they're wanting to develop, and they basically would be expanding the recycling land use to the north, to this area where this subject plat is under consideration.
The reason being, because if you come north there, you're still getting closer to the school with an eyesore for the community and passerby and all. That was my point.
Very good point. There is currently an open zoning violation case on the recycling center, and we're trying to get improvement there. There's been some improvement, not quite enough that we'd like to see, but code is active. Code enforcement is active with that properties to the south.
Hi, is the applicant here? Is there anything you'd like to add?
Comments A through C, we will meet. I'm not, on item C, we're not really sure where they want to orient the building or how they want to orient it on that lot, but do know they want to expand. That's why they're conjoining both lots into one. That's as far as I know at this moment. We'll have the water and sewer located. I'll put those on the plat, and then Horn Lake Water Association, I'll note that as well.
All right, does any commissioners have any questions for the applicant?
I do. And so, however you orient the building, you're prepared to put the proper setbacks in?
Yes, the building is not nearly the size of what is shown. So it will be 50 foot off of either Hobbs or whatever that intersection street is. It'll regardless of where it's orienting, it's going to face either Hobbs or East Center Street. So no matter what, we're going to be 50 foot off of either of those as far as we're concerned.
Okay.
Any other questions for the applicant or for Director Barr or for Andrew? Thank you, sir. All right, if there's no other discussion, do we have a motion?
Chairman,
Go ahead.
after reviewing case number 2023-2, the Planning Commission approves the request for subdivision final plat named revision of Lot 19 Center Street Industrial Park to combine two existing industrial zone lots for industrial development located at the southeast corner of East Center Street and Hobbs Drive in Horn Lake by HLMS Recycling Services LLC, applicant and landowner, PD LLC Engineering, consisting of 0.70 acres plus or minus, following the three conditions as noted and discussed, A, B, and C for the note revision, the water and sewer lines, and the setback restrictions.
And do we have a second? All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Egner,
Yes.
Commissioner Mercer, Commissioner McGann, yes.
Yeah.
Commissioner Ware,
Yes.
Commissioner Little,
Yes.
Commissioner Vidal.
Yes.
Okay, we have 5 to 1 abstain.
All right, thank y'all. All right, so we'll move on to case number 2023. A request for a one-lot subdivision final plat located at approximately 6180 Industrial Boulevard in the city of Horn Lake by Creative Constructions LLC, developer and owner, and Houston Engineering PLLC Engineering Company for land zone as PUD, consisting of approximately 5.2 acres plus or minus. Address is not official, has not been officially assigned by DeSoto County. Proposed land use is for a convenience store / gas station. A subdivision plat for the same name was approved by the city of Horn Lake on 9/20/2022, but this case is to expand the original plat to the north. And I'll turn this over to Director Barr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You did a good job of reading that and explaining that, because this is very similar to like the first case tonight, where it was a plat by the city, and then they're wanting to come back and revise it or whatever. So yeah, this was seen by the city last year and approved, and they're just wanting to come back and basically make it a larger area to try to incorporate the planned gas station convenience store land use. Next slide, please. So we just have our normal notes here that defines it's a minor subdivision, that sort of thing. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. So yeah, on this particular slide, you see the expanded area, which basically would be making the subject property larger to the north. And it does take in more of the 100-year floodplain, so that's what's depicted on that particular slide, is that kind of that pink mauvish area is the actual 100-year floodplain. So the proposed area, as you stated, is 5.2 acres. The water and sewer would be through the Horn Lake Water Association. The zoning is PUD, Planned Unit Development. Proposed is one lot. No new public roads are proposed with the plat. Next slide. This it has to do with easements, which is section 34-58 from the subdivision regulations. So we'd ask that they adjust on both sheets, both plat sheets, sheet 1 and sheet 2, that there be a 10-foot wide rear, which is on the east, 5 feet wide side, which is on the north, and a 10 feet wide utility easements along the two frontages, the frontages being on the west side and the south side of the subject property. Next slide. This again has to do with general suitability. It's kind of like that planning double check, if you will, from section 3462 of the subdivision regs. Let's see, to the west, there's PUD zoning and the location of volunteer grass and trees. Farther to the west is a career and technology center / school. To the north is PUD zoning, volunteer grass and trees for land use. To the east, PUD zoning, and then it's developing light industrial in the form of 2 sizable warehouses. And then to the south is also PUD zoning, and then a new road, and then is being built, which actually is the extension of Nail Road, and then also some more volunteer trees and grass. Next slide. Some other changes we'd ask on number 3 here to update survey note number 2 to adjust the new correct acreage at 5.2 acres. Number 4, please add a line for the signature of the secretary to the Planning Commission on sheet 1. And then number 5, please check with the Chancery Clerk's office for plat, style, and format and substance prior to submitting any signatures on Mylars. That's just to help reduce the number of times potentially where it goes back and forth with signatures between the city and the county. Next slide. This has to do with standards for water and sewer. They do have a utility note, number 1, on both sheets, but no locations of actual utility lines. So we'd ask that that the lines be shown if they're known. That'd be the main lines. And then also supply a will serve letter from the Horn Lake Water Association for both services. And that gets us to the last slide, which is possible motion. In this case, possible motion for approval with the following conditions attached to it. I'll just read the the conditions. A, please adjust on both sides of both sheets to the following: to have a 10 feet wide rear, a 5 feet wide side, and then 10 feet wide utility easements for both frontages, which would be the west and south sides. B, update survey note number 2 to the correct acreage of 5.2 acres. Item C, please add a line for the signature of the secretary to the Planning Commission on sheet 1. And then also, please, just as a general note, check with the Chancery Clerk's office for plat style and format and substance, et cetera, prior to submitting to the city for signatures on Mylars. And then E, please show the location of utility lines that will supply the subdivision and supply a will serve letter from the Horn Lake Water Association for both water and sewer services. That concludes the presentation, unless you have any questions. Thank you.
So does anybody have any questions for Director Barr?
Yes, I do, Director Barr. The water can be supplied by Horn Lake Water Association, but the sewer in that area is for the interceptor sewer.
Okay. You're saying the water would be the Water Association,
Yeah.
but then the interceptor would be for the sewer?
Sewer, correct.
Okay.
Any other questions for Director Barr?
Yeah, I missed what you said about the expansion. What did you say was going there? And in the 100-year floodplain, what will, is it gonna continue to be a 100-year floodplain?
Very good question, Commissioner Little. As far as I know, it would, the developer hasn't at least disclosed to us any ambitions to remove the property from the floodplain by elevating it. The city's floodplain regulations would dictate that if anything's built over there, it would have to have at least 2 feet of freeboard. Basically, the elevation line of the actual structures would have to be 2 feet over the base flood elevation, the BFE. It would be up to the developer if they just want to put the buildings basically to the south, outside of the floodplain, and basically I think maybe they would park the vehicles or maybe have parking that would serve the gas station, which is the proposed land use. And what was your second part? I've already forgot, sorry. You had two things.
Well,
Yes.
you answered it with that because I'd heard you
Oh.
say something about expansion, but I didn't know if you said anything about what was supposed to be there.
Okay, no, I haven't seen anything from the applicant. I'm just presuming that they need more area basically for vehicle circulation and parking to serve the actual gas station.
Any other questions, Director Barr? Is the applicant here? If you would state your name and address, please.
Engineering, P.O. Box 3087, Oxford, Mississippi, 38655.
Is there anything you'd like to add?
Mr. Barr is correct. In the future, the developer would, he hasn't submitted anything to me to get for us to get a layout for the site, but he does plan on filling some of that site in and applying for a Lomar F to bring part of that property out of the floodplain. And it should be pretty easy to do. There is floodway just north of there, and as long as we don't encroach on the floodway, should have no problem doing that.
Does any of the commissioners have any questions for the applicant?
When you raise this, what do you plan on putting on it, or do you have any idea yet?
He plans on putting a C-store with fuel for vehicles, and also a couple of lanes for maybe trucks that would be using industrial sites in the area.
So the building that you're planning on is going to be closer to the existing streets, or is it going to be basically into where the purple area is on your map?
It should be in the area that's not in the floodplain.
Okay.
But if we do something in the floodplain area, we're going to build it, above the floodplain 2 feet to meet the ordinance.
Now, you won't have to use as much land as your neighbor did over there. What did he raise it? He raised that land about, 30 feet?
Yeah, I haven't seen it, but I'd heard that they raised it significantly.
Any other questions to the applicant? Thank you, sir. All right, is there any other further discussion? All right, do we have a motion?
Yes, we have a motion. After review of application case number 2023-3SDFP, a request for a one-lot commercial subdivision final plat called the DeSoto Commons A8 Commercial Subdivision at about 6180 Interstate Boulevard in Horn Lake, consisting of 5.2 acres plus or minus. The Horn Lake Planning Commission recommends approval of the request to the Board of Aldermen with the following conditions attached to that, and that is A through E.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Egner,
Yes.
Commissioner Mercer,
Yes.
Commissioner McGahan, yes. Commissioner Ware,
Yes.
Commissioner Little,
Yes.
Commissioner Vidal.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, thank you. All right, moving on to case number 2023-4, a study session to look at the question of too many certain commercial land uses and zonings as a topic issue within the city of Horn Lake, and to present options to address the subject. And I guess I will turn this over to Director Barr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, staff was approached by one of the aldermen in the last couple months or whatever, lamenting the issue of various commercial land uses. I think some of the things that the Planning Commission and the Board of Aldermen have tackled in the last, 12 to 15 months or so regarding, car washes or gas stations and those sorts of things. And so what I wanted to do is try to present to you like a study session tonight. And obviously different options that you could do from this. You could say, well, you'd like further study. You could make a motion to initiate something, or you could just pass it on as some type of recommendation or no recommendation to the Board of Aldermen, which we would take to them probably for the second meeting in March, would be March the 21st. So I just kind of go through some of the options. I've kind of given them just my own kind of letter grade, like, from school, to try to give some guidance to the Planning Commission. So if you remember back from the tidal wave car wash, which is 4140 Fountain Lane from last year, when that was processed, there was a count, including that got approved through a conditional use. Once that got built and established, there'd be 14 car washes in town. And there's a count currently of 19 gas stations with 4 to 5 more in various stages of entitlement processing within the planning department. I was hoping to have an empty commercial building or bays in town for like the commercial zones. I don't actually have that number. I was out of the office for a while, and we weren't able to get that number. So that might be something that if you want to get further study or clarity on, that we could provide that at a future date. So I come up with, and there might be more options. I'm not saying that these are the only ones, obviously, but these are the first five different options that came to mind. So options number 1, and again, remember the letter grade is just kind of suggested by staff, with A being the best and F being the worst, just like a person would have in school. Number 1, eliminate land uses such as car washes, gas stations from those districts where the uses are permitted by right currently. And I'm just going to read here. It's probably just best for me to read. This would be a simple amendment to make, but the issue it would create is the currently legally established land uses that were established prior to such an amendment would become immediately non-conforming land uses. So if those land uses were taken from the zoning ordinance that are permitted by right now, let's say in C3 or C4 zoning districts, if you take those letters out where they're not permitted anymore, then the land uses that are already out there that have been established legally in the city would be automatically non-conforming. And so the zoning ordinance, all zoning ordinances, create separate rules, if you will, for non-conforming land uses to make them difficult to continue or expand and that sort of thing. So that could be potentially problematic for the existing legal land uses that were established in the commercial districts. So I rated that as an F. I don't know if that's necessarily a good idea, because the people that are established legally now all of a sudden have a non-conforming land use. And they may have spent hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars to establish their land uses where they're at. Option 2, do the elimination of the land uses mentioned above in item 1, but then create a new specials district and rezone the properties that would be made non-conforming to this new district classification. So that's an option. It could be done, but that would take a lot of time and a lot of work to create a new zoning district and then also rezone those certain properties to that new zoning designation. You always got to be very careful creating a new zoning district when you already have like a certain stock or inventory, if you will, through the zoning ordinance. There's lots of things to consider. There's what the zoning ordinance would say for setbacks, what it would say for actually land uses that are permitted, the ones that would be only permitted through a conditional use. There's landscaping requirements, there's signage requirements, and so all those phases of the zoning ordinance would have to address that new zoning district in some way, shape, or form. So I give that a rating of F. Option 3, create and/or increase performance standard conditions for the respective land uses to make the establishment of the new land uses a higher quality or discourage smaller players / developers from venturing into those specific land uses altogether. So that's an option. It seems a bit more doable than number 2 or number 1 and has some decent merit. But would it be too little or too late? And it also brings into question if the city was desiring to have smaller players to be able to enter into the market or whatever, if that would be seen as unfair or that sort of thing. But obviously raising the quality or of certain standards for those land uses, let's say if they wanted to still do car wash, or if they still wanted to do gas station or various commercial or whatever, it would be a higher standard if they were able to be met by a particular landowner or developer or applicant. Option number 4, working with the existing numbers that we already have or we could come up with, reach out to, say, Mississippi State University to gather data to see if those land uses are over-established for a city of Horn Lake's population or size, and if so, then amend the land use comprehensive plan to reflect a specific policy or goals and objectives towards those land uses. From there, downzone those properties that are congruent with the wording and intent of the comprehensive plan goals and objectives to achieve the final desired result. This seems to be a viable approach. Use the comprehensive plan to create specific goals and or objectives regarding these land uses. This could be, quote, X many throughout the jurisdiction, or so many per main street intersection. Let's say, like, if the desire was not to have any more than 1 gas station per main intersection. Like when I say main, is basically like arterial roads or something like that, not like, let's say, like a local or a collector road. And then say that's going to be the maximum. So that way, if someone comes to the city saying we would like to rezone this on this intersection to be able to build a car wash or a gas station, you could say, well, the plan basically says we're limiting it to, like, let's say 1 per intersection, main intersection or primary intersection, or 2 or whatever the number would be. So I'd give that a rating of either B+ / A-. It's obviously instrumental if the city would work in that fashion to do something to the comprehensive plan, because basically various land use decisions have to be supported by this jurisdiction's comprehensive plan. And so that's very important. And then item 5 is moratorium. This is a specific governmental action towards prohibiting things, in this case certain types of land use development from occurring for a period of time. These can be tricky to design, implement, and disengage from. A jurisdiction must have a good reason for enacting them and really are only a temporary approach, in my opinion. The jurisdiction would need to articulate why certain land uses are negative or bad for the community. Seems like the likelihood of entering into a litigious environment seems high with this particular option. I'd recommend against that approach. So I'd give it a score or a grade of letter F. When I went to the planning conference last October, it was held in Orange Beach, Alabama. What happens between Alabama and Mississippi is they usually alternate the educational sites. They just alternate it from one year to the next. So this year it'll be in Mississippi. Last year was in Alabama. But I remember when I was there was a gal, a planner from the city of Tuscaloosa in Alabama. And what she described is that the city in Tuscaloosa had actually went with a moratorium over the development or against the development in a particular area. So if you go back to, from what she explained, the University of Alabama was expanding, more students, needed more housing, and the university there, from my take, from what she said, was reluctant to add that housing, so that adding the housing supply, if you will, fell upon the city. So they identified an area or some areas in town to address that over a period of time. They did something through the zoning map, through the zoning ordinance, and they were fairly successful. There was some development that occurred in one area of town over a period of, let's say, 5 or 10 years, where they added housing stock. But one thing that they noticed as housing stock was added in the form of like apartments, condominiums, that sort of thing, is that they had one trunk sewer line that went kind of downtown that was slowly filling up as far as capacity. It went from 50% capacity, and then as more developments came online, then, you know, the capacity went down, and they got down to like, they only had like 4 to 6% capacity in that main trunk sewer line, so they imposed a moratorium, because obviously if they had much more development go in, it's going to be a major disaster with too much sewer, and the pipe wasn't large enough. So they did the moratorium to, you know, stop growth. They went through, they did some bonding, they went through and designed, and then they installed a larger sewer pipes. I don't know if it was like so big and then they went way big, but obviously that takes time and takes resources to be able to do that. So once the city did that, over a course of several years, then of course then they were able to restore more of a normal sewer capacity, and then they lifted the moratorium. But I guess the city got a lot of pushback on that, even over that time, even with that type of justification for enacting the moratorium. So that's just kind of my take based upon what she stated at the meeting, and that's probably something to be aware of, you know, when planning any type of moratorium. So those are the 5 options that I come up with, and then so that kind of conclude the presentation, at least to that point.
All right, thank you, Director Barr. I do have a question, though. You mentioned the comprehensive plan and maybe specifying and changing stuff in that. Are you talking about changing the existing comprehensive plan, or waiting till we get through the new comprehensive plan that we have to do this year?
Well, obviously, the next agenda item is the Orion Planning and Design Group, which is the city's planning consultant that is hired to update the existing plan. The existing plan is 20 years old. If I remember correctly, in the Mississippi title, the Mississippi code is that's like the maximum length for a comprehensive plan to be enacted or to be in use. And so we're in the 20th year, and so we're doing that as we speak. At least my recommendation would be, if there's any vision here that the city has, whether that be through the Planning Commission, the citizenry, or the Board of Aldermen, that they would try to incorporate that right now, because that's a perfect time to do that, as opposed to trying to amend the old plan, which is 20 years old, which is probably going to be replaced later this year. So,
Does anybody else have any questions or suggestions about the memo and what we're discussing?
Mr. Barr, what rating did you give item number 3?
thank you for the question, Commissioner Egner. Yeah, item 3, I give a B- to as a grade.
And do you think item 1 and 2 are in effect moratoriums?
They could be seen as that, you know, in a way. I'm just, as a land use practitioner or whatever, I'm really nervous when people start talking about moratorium. There's obviously reasons for them, but the jurisdiction, whether it be a city or a county, really needs to state and really needs to study it well. And to me, a moratorium is just more than it's just a stopgap, really, whether that be for a year or 5 years or whatever. It's not a long-term solution. To me, something systemic would have to be changed if a jurisdiction wanted to make a long-term change. So a moratorium seems to kind of just be a short-term Band-Aid fix.
So can I ask you a question, like with regard to gas stations? We approved this gas station at Interstate and Nail, and there was some discussion about how many gas stations were already in the city of Horn Lake, but there, in reality, is no gas station right down there at Nail and Interstate. So they might need a gas station down there, where they might not really need another gas station at Tulane and Nail. They already have 2 there. So, but if someone wanted to put another gas station at Tulane and Nail, there'd really be no ordinance stopping them from doing that. And that's not currently against our comprehensive plan. Is that correct? I mean, so if we denied that, we would have to deny that under the topic of common sense. I don't think that's in the comprehensive plan.
Correct. I mean, obviously, if you're talking intersection of Tulane and Nail Road, yeah, there's the 2 gas stations there now, and let's see, the northeast corner is residential already, and so then the only one I think that could be developed further in any way, shape, or form probably would be the southwest corner. So, I mean, obviously, someone could approach the city right now if they wanted to rezone it. And we'd have to look at the future land use map, but obviously the future land use map through the existing plan is 20 years old. And so that's why I say it might be best on this particular subject, if it seems to be on some of the citizens' mind, it might be best to integrate whatever might be done to address the issue through the comprehensive plan update. It seems to me like it's perfect timing for that. But if the city, let's say somebody come to the city, the planning commission, they wanted to rezone that southwest corner of that intersection, the city would have to deal with it. I suppose they could, at that time, just kind of table it, depending on what would come about from the comprehensive plan.
Maybe that intersection was a poor example. There may be another intersection in the city where that business might already be allowed, but not really wanted.
Yes, I mean, if the existing zoning is in place, I mean, if I remember correctly, in the C4 zone, there's like 54 land uses in the city's zoning structure that it's permitted by right, meaning that, the alderman can't touch it and the planning commission can't touch it. It's already given, it's already allowed by right through the zoning. With the C3 zone, there's like 60 different land uses that are permitted by right, and some of those could be gas stations or car washes. Now, if a person goes into like M1 zoning, if you look at the zoning ordinance as far as the industrial or light industrial land uses that are permitted by right, and then also the commercial ones, I believe there's 68, no, I take that back, there's 86 land uses that are permitted by right in the M1 zone. So it makes it really difficult, in your job or your capacity, and then the alderman's job to make a final decision when, they have an applicant that's standing before them and they state they want to do one particular land use. Let's say it's M1, but in reality they have to consider another 85 land uses in their mind because that's the potential of what could be developed. I think the board did look at late last year that they could actually restrict on a rezoning and not be a PUD. Obviously a PUD is a custom type of zoning. But they could actually restrict the number of land uses that are allowed. Let's say if somebody asked for a specific given zoning, they could restrict it. And according to legal counsel for the city, that's something that could be done. And then we've talked to DeSoto County. They do the GIS mapping for us, and there is a way to specially designate those basically restricted zones on the zoning map. Because as staff, we have to be able to figure out what was enacted at a particular action by the Board of Aldermen. Let's say, it might be C3, there might be 60 land uses that are permitted by right to the zoning, but let's say they only allowed for 38 of them. So, but there is a way through the zoning map to designate that, and then we would always have to look that up as staff. So, I'm trying not to ramble. I'm hoping I'm adding something there.
Sounds like the best way to do this is through the revision of the comprehensive plan.
So what actions, so if we was going to take action, so there's possible we could just table this or we could just say that we want to discuss this more and let the comprehensive plan take its course and have it address these?
Yeah, as far as options available to you tonight, like I kind of stated earlier, you could table it and just let it set, or you could just wait for more data to be gathered through the comprehensive plan update process, and then maybe there'll be some things that through that, because then we also get public input. It's just not us kind of planning in a vacuum, so to speak. And then there might be some guidance that can come from that. Or you could go with one of these recommendations. You could initiate something for staff to do, or you could pass it on to the aldermen to let them give their turns at it. To see if they like any of these options or whatever, or if they have something else, and maybe there's something else that I haven't provided to you that appeals to you that would need further study. So,
is there any further discussion?
I like number 4, and I was thinking if we could have MSU look into like the area and set boundaries, like we can only have 3 gas stations in, say, 2,000 square feet. Well, maybe that could work, and we put that in the comprehensive plan. But we need to know exactly where these gas stations are in terms of distance from each other, so we can put it in where it doesn't create a problem. legal problem.
Yeah, I think what you're referring to is, and we did this earlier or last year with the car wash. So I reached out to MSU, and basically what you're talking about is like threshold analysis. There's a concept economically that for any land use to be viable, it needs a certain amount of population for it to be supportable. So, you know, obviously a barber shop is, you can have more barber shops in a jurisdiction because there's less capital involved to be able to establish a barber shop versus, let's say, a 1 million square foot warehouse. That's going to take a lot more capital, and it's going to take a lot more population, almost like a regional population, to be able to support it.
Anybody?
Well, I do have something, just a, excuse me, a statement. I'd like to thank you and whichever alderman brought this forth, because this has been kind of a pet annoyance of mine. On my last count, you know, Horn Lake only has 0.1 acres in the city limits. And in the city limits, we have 18 car washes. That includes everything from mobile to coin-operated to hand wash, everything. That was also before the new one came in. I can't remember the name of Tidal Wave, before they came in. So, yeah, that's over 1 per acre. So that's a lot of car washes.
Do you mean per square mile?
No. Well, yeah, I'm sorry, yes, per square mile. So, but that's a lot of car washes. So, and we have a lot of them that are side by side, and now there are 3 that are abandoned, but the structures are still there, and you still know it's a car wash. It's just an abandoned building, so just an eyesore.
Any other comments, and do we have any recommendations?
Chairman Barr, I have a question. On the zoning, the property, you say if it's already zoned and it's entitled to certain businesses, there's nothing we can do on it, right? Even if it's saturated?
Well, very good question, Commissioner Ware. Basically, really the only option a person, you know, the city could do there is basically like, you know, Andrew and I, we've talked about this. When you look at the zoning chart, the use table in the zoning ordinance, it's under Article 12. The chart has like 2 letters on it. It has a letter P. So if a person looks at a particular land use and they look at the chart for a particular zoning classification, if it has the letter P, that means it's permitted by right. That means they have the property rights in place to do that land use. They would still have to do potentially other entitlements, building permits, site plan design review, perhaps subdivision if they're wanting to divide a particular property. Then there's the letter C, which is a conditional use, means that they have to come before this board for recommendation, and we take your recommendation to the Board of Aldermen, and they would have the final decision on a conditional use. And there's factors that this board looks at, and then also the Board of Aldermen. They're actually different factors, though they're kind of similar. And then, of course, if the box is blank, that means it's not permitted at all. There's not even a conditional use as an option. So, like one of these options that's before you is to change what's already existing. You would have to actually change the Article 12, the chart itself, and let's say take away the letter P, and then therefore then it wouldn't be an option any longer for a particular land use in a given zoning district. But keeping in mind, and I tried to point out in the memo, there may be already land uses in town that were legally established under the chart, and to change the chart would, in that way, would make those basically immediately non-conforming land uses. And then the zoning itself, all zoning ordinances have a non-conforming section that makes it basically the desirement, the focus of the government is to try to make that non-conforming land use more difficult to continue in the future, either by making it harder to expand, harder to repair if it's damaged for some way. So that's something to keep very mindful when contemplating that type of option.
When do we expect that plan to be completed?
Very good question. Well, I think we're going to hear the schedule here in a little bit from the consultant, because they're in the house tonight. And so I think they've said basically the focus is try to get something adopted by the end of the year, and that would actually fall within that 20-year time frame as laid out by the Mississippi Code.
All right, could we do maybe a combination of these 2 options? Say like a moratorium until the plan is put into order?
I think that's an option or whatever. The city would have to be very careful to enumerate it and, as far as the reasoning behind the moratorium. And, you know, let's say it could be something that just takes place, the moratorium lasts this year or until the new plan, comes up with a new option, perhaps.
Could we deny, say somebody come with a need a conditional use for a gas station, could we deny it and not be legally liable until the new comprehensive plan is put in place, which would include and make it not able to come in?
Very good question there. I would think right now, without anything else being enacted, that the city would have to stay within its already language existing in the zoning ordinance, because I think there's like 6 factors that the planning commission looks at, and then there's like 5 or 6 different factors that the Board of Aldermen look at when they're looking at a conditional use.
All right, so any other discussion, or do we have any type of recommendation, or do we want to table this until later, or do we want to, so basically we can either make some sort of recommendation, we can send it to the alderman, the Board of Aldermen, or we can just table this till a later date.
Chairman, I suggest that we table it and, till we find what we can do with a comprehensive plan, or send it on to the Board of Aldermen, one of the two.
Is that your motion?
He was just letting us know what his, so do we have a motion from the floor?
Make a motion, we table it, subject to the comprehensive plan.
Second.
We have a motion and a second
And the third.
for Commissioner Little seconded. Do we have any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Commissioner Egner,
Yes.
Commissioner Mercer. Commissioner McGann, yes. Commissioner Ware,
Yes.
Commissioner Little,
Yes.
Commissioner Vidal.
Yes.
Okay, it passes. We will table this.
Okay, next on the agenda is the initial meeting for the Orion planning. So before we get started, I was going to let everybody have a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and we'll pick up with this so they can get set up. All right, this is case number 2023-5, the initial meeting presentation on the update to the city's land use for the comprehensive plan by the city planning consultant Orion Planning and Design Group. The presentation will be to discuss the need for a comprehensive plan and how Orion does the comprehensive plan update. And at this time, I'll turn it over to the Orion Planning Group.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, good evening. It's good to be with you. I know several of you from past associations and look forward to getting to know the rest of you. I'm Bob Barber with Orion Planning Design. I've had a long connection with Horn Lake on a consulting basis and a couple of times providing some interim planning services, and very much appreciate you offering our team the opportunity to facilitate an update or essentially a new comprehensive plan. We're excited about it. We're glad to be with you. We wanted to take just a few minutes, 10, 15 minutes, just to brief you on the project, make sure everybody is sort of starting out on the ground floor, give you some very, very limited initial information, but cover more the kind of the process and what's happening and why are we here right at this moment in time. So to get us started, we prepared just a brief presentation, and I don't control the slides, so I guess I'll point at you, Andrew, if you'll advance those. Obviously, your comprehensive plan, as you've already been discussing, is a very, very fundamental document to the development of the community over time. It sets a direction for development policy, zoning, provides the basis. It's not the zoning code, but it provides the basis of the zoning code. It provides the vision of how you want the community to develop. It explores the potential for what the community can be over time. And when it's done well, it represents kind of on a consensus basis the overall aspirations of the community. So we'll be diligently working to get inputs into the process to answer the questions such as you see on the screen there. If you remain on the path you're on in terms of community development, what will Horn Lake be in 20 years? Is that satisfactory? Should there be fresh vision for community development? Who are you competing against? What are the outside forces that work on the community? And what are the long-term aspirations that will contribute to a very vibrant and healthy Horn Lake over time? So the plan does that, and as you've already mentioned, you've engaged Orion Planning Design to do it. I'm to facilitate it, I should say, not to do it, and that's an important distinction, because when we come to do planning, we want to facilitate Horn Lake's planning. We're not bringing you, we can bring you experiences and we can provide reflections on what other communities do, but we will want to work hard to understand how you want the community, how the community wants to grow and develop over time. So you've engaged us to facilitate that. I'm a partner. I'm just down the road. I live just outside of Hernando. But we've got a very distinguished team, too, of one of my Orion partners here, Bert Kirkendall. You'll hear from him in a moment. We have other partners that will be here in the morning, Oliver Seabolt and Allison Mount. We have a couple of employee team members that'll be with us, and then we have teamed with our distinguished economist, Aaron Arnett. He's with Arnett Muldrow out of South Carolina. So as we move ahead, I won't spend much time introducing us, other than to say, as you advance it there, Andrew, that map will sort of reflect, or it doesn't sort of reflect, it does reflect where we work, which is across the country. And occasionally we have done some international work as well. And you'll obviously see we do a lot in the Southeast and the Intermountain West. So we bring that experience to you. We think that's an advantage. We can bring broad perspective to the work that we're about to conduct. And as you advance the slide there, this is a picture of the team. Myself, Bert, Allison Maux from Montana, Oliver Seabolts in Lower Georgia, Carol Ray's in Florida, Chattanooga, Kelly Martin, our planner, Joanna Tuthill, our planner from Washington State, and then Aaron Arnett is teamed with us. So that's our team. You'll see them all at one point or another, or at least they'll all be here at one point or another. So as we can go ahead and advance that, this, I thought we hid some of these slides. So I'm gonna move. Well, let's camp here. We're operating, as was mentioned earlier, under Mississippi Code 17.1-1, which sort of sets the parameters for how we do planning. And we take, in addition to just the legal parameters, which I'm not going to go into now, we take a distinctive planning approach. We've used the methodology and the approach in many communities. We find it very effective, and we want you to know just briefly how we come at planning. First of all, any community, Horn Lake no exception, is a collection of interrelated systems, so that there is a mobility and transportation system. There is a land use pattern, development pattern system. There is a natural environmental system at work, which you discussed tonight. There's an economic component to all of those systems are interrelated. So when we approach the planning process, we want to do it holistically. We're not going to take any one thing in isolation, but we want to know, how does mobility impact the way things develop, and what is it about your economy that's creating this market for tons of gas stations, and how are all these systems related, so that we can come up with really excellent planning outcomes when that time comes. Another concept that we use when we backstop a plan or come to approach a plan is just the notion of life cycles, which is a very simple notion that every community as a whole, it's born, it typically grows, well, it does grow, if it has any life in it, often rapidly. It will plateau, and it will decline. And we can judge that on the community as a whole, or we can take it neighborhood by neighborhood. Every neighborhood is in a sort of a life cycle. And it's very important to understand, because if we can identify where the community is in its various parts on the life cycle, we can begin to plan for the appropriate planning policies that will extend its life, or that will revitalize certain parts, or that will handle growth in the way the community wants to handle growth. So it's important. We want you to know that approach that number one, we believe it to be very thoughtful. We know it to be thoughtful, and we believe it to be very effective. And so we just want to make that philosophic statement to you. That approach goes into this methodology here. We will conduct the planning process in 5 steps. The first step is what we are doing right now, which is starting. We have to start at step 1. And step 1 is what we would term as discovery. We are here today, tomorrow, and a little bit of Wednesday. Tomorrow, Tuesday, a little bit of Wednesday. Or no, most of Wednesday, some of Thursday. We're here for the next several days in order to discover who and what Horn Lake is. Now, we have a notion of it because we've looked at the statistics, we've looked at development patterns, we've looked at the environment, but we don't really know Horn Lake. You know Horn Lake. The citizens know Horn Lake. The leaders know Horn Lake. And so we want to engage them in a series of focus groups in discovery. That's step 1, so that we can understand who is Horn Lake. Number 2 will be a step to come, which is a process we would put the word direction to it, where we begin to feed that information back and get direction from the community, and we have methods for doing this, so that we get vision, goals, where do you want to be, what do you want to do with the potential. The third step would be actually generating the planning document itself, the official stuff that comes out of the process. And then the fourth step there is implementation. How will we recommend implementing the plan? Through zoning code adjustments, other policy, crafting other kinds of policies, but not just rules and regulations, which you must have, but also recommended investments. So there's policies, there's investments, there may be some, no public and private investments, there may be some process issues that we come up, how do we implement is step 4. And then step 5 is the ongoing, if there's any ongoing monitoring and training, we'll be out of the loop by then, and step 5 will be left with the community. So that's the planning process. Now, just to introduce it very, very briefly, but we're not conveying data, we're just bumping slides. We will be doing an in-depth understanding of the environmental context of Horn Lake, which has long been a major feature of this community. And you've discussed it tonight with a floodplain, tree canopy, water patterns, the big natural area to the north there that you have, all of that. We start with environmental understanding of the community. It will also include a very thorough analysis of development patterns, to include what is here on the ground now, looking at vacant areas, agricultural areas yet to be developed, what is their capacity and potential over time, and so that we will understand very clearly development patterns going forward. We will also include, just go to the next one. Just keep going. We've emphasized that point. Also including very thorough understanding, and these are these systems we're talking about. I mentioned all interconnected system element of mobility, and I'm going to pass it off to my colleagues now.
Thanks, everyone. We're happy to be here. And yeah, part of that analysis is looking at mobility in an in-depth level and how that interacts with land development, but also how your current mobility system, which is your streets, your sidewalks, any kind of trails, green belts, how that ties the city together. How do people move around town? And how does that affect life here? We're going to look at walkability, bikeability. We're going to look at different, streets. It's, a comp plan, it's a big picture, but that doesn't mean we don't drill down into the details. We're going to look at corridors, how they're functioning, and what the potential is for certain corridors to be transformed to serve neighborhoods better, to serve commercial areas or public spaces better. So this is an example of a street that I worked on in Chattanooga that's a before and after. It's a street that was repurposed to serve all the users of that neighborhood and of the surrounding schools and commercial areas. Okay. And we'll jump into the market analysis.
So, as Bob mentioned, there's a number of systems here, whether it's mobility or certainly the economy, and everything that we do with Orion is market-based. Understanding what the trends in the market are, what those opportunities happen to be, is going to inform the rest of the planning process. And we've certainly done a little bit of analysis before this discovery trip. Learned a little bit about the community. We're going to learn a lot more over the next few days, and that's going to help us drill down more specifically into certain areas of the data that really we need to be relevant to the plan. But a couple of quick things that we've learned. You're looking at your general demographics, and I don't think any of this is anything you don't know. You all have experienced explosive growth over the last, say, 3, maybe even 4 decades. But the last decade, from 2010 to 2020, it's plateaued a little bit and it's slowed tremendously. DeSoto County is still growing. You all are still growing, but at a much slower pace. The rest of the metro area is actually declining in population. If we look at your median household income, you all are in the kind of the lower half of the region, or your lower 50% of the region. You're younger than the region when you look at age. The next slide shows a little bit more about housing, which is very interesting here. And I can't read this, but the good thing is I looked over this before this meeting. But your 75% of your housing units are single-family, owner-occupied housing, whereas you have about 18%, actually no, 20-something% of multifamily, or close to 20% multifamily. It's actually a little bit higher multifamily in some of the communities that we typically work in. Your housing values are lower compared to the larger region, but they've also grown by over 12% over the last year. Now that's a pretty big national trend. So we look at our values, and they may be a little bit lower, but they're also increasing in value. That's a great thing. By the same token, housing in general across the country is becoming harder and harder to afford. So that's a common trend. If we look at affordability, and again, I can't see the numbers right here, but I believe that 37% of your renters are what's considered cost burdened. And what that means is they're spending more than 30% of their monthly income on housing costs, so rent, utilities, etc. Like 26%, I believe, 20+% of your homeowners also are cost burdened, so they're spending more than 30%. If we look at employment, and this is real quick here, you all are a net exporter of jobs. More people are going outside. More people that live here are going outside the community to work than are coming in. That's a suburban issue that you see quite a bit. As you might imagine, most of those folks are going to Memphis and South Haven. The next slide and the last slide is retail snapshot. So we do some supply and demand studies. We compare what stores sell within a region to what the consumers who purchase, or what the consumers buy on an annual basis in that region, the people that live in that region. And if consumers that live in an area are spending more than the stores are selling, dollars are leaking. They're going outside of your community because that particular good or service isn't located here. Now that translates directly to demand and opportunity. Now you all are actually gaining. In fact, this entire part of, if you look at you all and South Haven in particular, you all are gaining. So last year, Horn Lake gained over $100 million in retail sales. Again, more people are coming in to the tune of over $100 million on an annual basis of buying the goods and services that are here. If we look at South Haven, they're gaining by over $1 billion. That's a pretty massive amount. And, they're probably, when we look in this a little bit more detail, we're going to find that South Haven is probably the main commercial market within the greater metro area. But when there's leakage, that really tells us what are our opportunities to grow. When there's gain like this, that's a real positive thing. But we have to look at it a little bit deeper and look in the nuances, not just within Horn Lake, but within South Haven, within the larger metro area, to figure out what categories are leaking and still showing opportunity for growth. And some of that is happening here, and we'll share more of that in detail as we go throughout this week, but also as we go throughout the rest of the process. There's one other slide that you could skip after this, and then we'll take it back to Bert.
Great, so we're going to look very closely at your parks amenities and the potential for new amenities such as trails. in advance one, please, Andrew. And looking at, already kind of, getting that inventory, looking at the mapping of the parks. And for example, the green areas are, I believe that's a 10-minute walk shed around each park. So looking at what neighborhoods have like walking access to parks. And also looking at the green belts that run through town, the floodplains, and basically the heavily forested natural areas and what opportunities those present. Right. So tomorrow, really hope everyone can come to the community kickoff meeting. It's going to be at 6 o'clock p.m. at First Baptist Church in the Fellowship Hall. It's going to be a very much more detailed presentation. And at the end of it, we're going to have an interactive mapping activity so that everyone in the audience can actually scan the code, go to an online map, excuse me, and input specific places where there are issues, where there are opportunities. We want to collect a lot of data points from stakeholders, from the public, to know what are the parts of town they really value, what are the parts that really could see a lot of help, a lot of work, parts where there are opportunities that could be presented. And we're going to also provide that mapping exercise online as well. Okay, and that's the same thing, so let's go one more. Yeah, so kind of to jump back into the process, right now we're in discovery mode. And one more slide, please, Andrew. So that's hard to see, but this is the project time frame. And we are right there we are in discovery mode. This is discovery week. And the comp plan process, the two really big highlights are discovery week and planning week. And like Bob said, discovery week, we're here to really absorb information. We're here to get information from you, from the public, stakeholders. We've got the big kickoff meeting tomorrow night. We are going to have an online survey, stakeholder meetings targeting specific issues like economic development, parks, mobility, and we're just trying to draw in as much information as possible. The planning week is going to be in July, and it differs in that we're taking all this information, we're compiling it, we're mapping it, we're putting it together. Planning week is about really proposing, through interaction with the public, specific ideas on how the city can grow in the future, both with land development, with mobility, with parks and rec, with environmental. How does that come together? What can that look like? And to really present some very physical, very graphic ideas to the public and get feedback on that, so that it's not just a map with blobs on it like planners like to do, right? It's actually a vision, for example, a corridor vision. What can this corridor look like through this new vision that the community pursues? So one more, thanks. So that is the Discovery Visit calendar. So like I said, tomorrow night we'll have the community kickoff. We've got stakeholder meetings. The advisory group is meeting tomorrow. So a lot of meetings, a lot of feedback, but also some open time where we're going to be out in the field. We're going to be walking corridors, looking at different places within the city, but also having open time for impromptu meetings. If there's neighborhood groups we need to meet with, if there are individuals we need to meet with, we want to be open and have team member time to be able to spend time with those people. Folks. So that is what we wanted to present tonight. We'd love to field any questions that you might have about the project or about this week.
Right, so does any of the commissioners have any questions? All right, this is a public hearing, so if there's anybody in the public that would like to speak, Mr. Miller. I'm just going to ask you, get 3 minutes. Do I need to time you, or are you good?
No, I can get this
Okay, I just got you.
real quick.
All right.
First of all, Commissioner Egner my card calls me facilitator. You call yourself facilitators. I was facilitators. They got other words.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Is there anybody else from the public or in the audience that would like to speak? All right, we're going to close the public hearing. All right, anything else from the commissioners? All right, we're going to turn it over to other business, so I'll turn it over to Director Barr.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you guys for your presentation. Looking forward to other items this week. You're good. You're good. All right, thank you. So yeah, under other business, 6A is to give you an update on department hirings or personnel update. The recent hire of the person that we'd done for stormwater coordinator resigned at the middle of the month. So we're looking at some, I'm going to try to present some new job descriptions to the Board of Aldermen probably in the month of March. So hopefully they'll consider that. And then we're also going to have probably interviews for the last code enforcement officer position that we have open. Try to maybe have, I need to get coordinated with the HR director, Mrs. Linville, potentially maybe as soon as next week as far as interviews for the last code enforcement officer position. So that's the recent changes or thoughts or happening on personnel within the planning department. B, I probably won't say too much, is comprehensive plan because we just had that. So they give you the discussion. It's Discovery Week, where the planning or planning rush week would be in July, like July 10th to the 14th. So like using that slide that Andrew still has up there, that first column, if I can do it, like here, we've got this first column, that's today. And then the meeting tonight is this. Oh, very good. So yeah, this is Monday, February the 27th, and this is where they were kind of talking to you about how they do comprehensive plans. And then tomorrow, there's a series of about 5 different events. There'll be a meeting with the mayor and the planning consultant and planning staff, city planning staff tomorrow morning at 9. There's going to be a Horn Lake community tour with the planning group that was just before you and the rest of their team, which I guess is in town tonight, but they'll be actually available for that tour tomorrow. And this is basically just to try to look at it, the community. You know, we've got a van we're going to bring up from Hernando, and we're just going to drive through the community. And this is kind of like, I call it the planner's bubble tour, where it's basically looking at the city through a planner's lens or whatever. Then we've got the advisory group, which is about 12 or 13 individuals. We've got a luncheon tomorrow here at City Hall. That'll be at noon. Then we have the first of the stakeholder meetings. That'll be on transportation. That'll be down the road here at the First Baptist Church. That'll be on transportation. And then there'll be the community kickoff meeting still at the church, but at 6 p.m. tomorrow night. So anybody that's viewing at home that is interested in coming and hearing more in-depth detail by the planning consultant and a chance to give some input, that would be great as well. That's 6 o'clock tomorrow night. And then move on to Wednesday, March the 1st. We have the second stakeholder meeting, which would be economic development. That'd be like developers, contractors, business owners, that sort of thing, at 10 o'clock. I don't know if it's 10 or 10:30. I can't quite tell looking at this. That would be Wednesday morning. That would be actually at City Hall. And then there'll be a team, the Orion Planning Group. That'd be a team lunch with them on Wednesday at noon. And then the last stakeholder meeting would be, I believe it's at 2 o'clock, and that would be on parks and recreational type activities. So we've tried to invite some folks that would come in at that time, and that would be here at City Hall. And then there'll be like a final meeting, like the end of the day on Wednesday or Thursday morning, and then they depart. So that's this planning kind of Discovery Week. Those are the items that are scheduled for this week. So it's a busy week here in town. We hope that the people that if they're at home and they're tuning in, if they get a chance to come out to the kickoff meeting or any of the individual stakeholder meetings, that they're certainly invited, and hopefully they can come and attend to witness that. And then switching back to other business, 6C, I thought thanks for those that were able to attend the training opportunity last week at the DeSoto Council, Economic Council. They're on Pepper Chase Drive there in South Haven. We had a speaker, attorney, a land use attorney from Tennessee, speak on Mississippi, Horn Lake type issues. And then we had the Thomas Hood. He was the chair of the State Ethics Commission. He wasn't in person, he did that electronically. And then I spoke on some planning things for the last segment. So thank you for those that could attend. Hopefully you're able to draw some things and that were edifying to you on those things from last week. And that's all I've got.
All right, so does any of the commissioners have anything else? I will say real quick is we appreciate you and whoever else was involved in putting that training together. I thought it was very informative for us, the commissioners, for us to get that and understand some of the nuances that maybe we didn't know of before.
Now, are we invited to these events, and can we get that schedule?
We can forward you that. Very good question. We can forward you that this schedule. We can do that via email. If Mr. Mercer would like one, because he's less on the email wavelength, we could hand you that, a paper one, if you'd be interested in that. I think some of you are on actually the advisory group. I don't remember which ones. I think there's like 3 of you on there, and so you'd be a part to come tomorrow to the luncheon. So, but yeah, any of those, if you feel that you would like to come to the kickoff meeting tomorrow night, if that's something that you could participate in. And then any of those individual stakeholder meetings, if you feel like that group is you or whatever, you feel free to come to that. Any of these planning commission meetings like tonight, dealing with the comprehensive plan, I'm gonna advertise those as public hearings. So like tonight is a public hearing, so that way if there's anybody in the public that would come and like to give input, I'm going to just make that as kind of a standard thing. 1, just to cover ourselves legally, but 2, also to gain insight from the public at any time. So.
Anything else? All right, do we have a motion to adjourn? All right, roll call. We'll just do this officially this time. All right, is everybody in favor, say aye. Anybody opposed, or the same? We're adjourned.